Hi guys, welcome back to the Adaptive Zone podcast. My name is Matthew Boyd. I'm a physiotherapist and running coach. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, share it with a friend. Today we're going to be talking to, well, me. We're going to talk about my running goals for 2023. And while that might sound a little self-serving, I do intend for this to be a useful episode for you guys. Now, you might notice already it sounds a little different, and it will be a little different because today we are live. So I'm broadcasting, if I got things to work, currently live on YouTube and Facebook. It is 8:22 p.m. on December 31st, and I have not missed a podcast episode per month in the last 2 years, and I didn't have one this month, and I wanted to do this one, and this is the first time I have had the opportunity to get to it. So I'm trying to get it in just at the last minute, but it is quite appropriate timing because, if we're going to make goals for next year, the very last day and the last hour of this year is a good time to do it. Now, some of you may remember the bad old days when I first started this podcast. I did a bunch of live episodes, and that was mainly because I was nervous about doing the podcast, and I thought doing it live just kind of would give me one less thing to get in the way of me actually producing it and publishing it. But they were awful. So my apologies for those first few episodes, and I'm hoping today's is going to suck a lot less. And the reason it's going to suck less is because I'm going to be quick. So I'm going to get this in under 15 minutes, I'm hoping, at least 20. I've got some notes, which I didn't do before. I just kind of used to freestyle it. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit more succinct. That's the plan anyway. So we will see how that goes. Anyway, the other reason I wanted to do it live is because it's a little different. We're going to be talking about, a little bit more of my personal stuff, which obviously I don't get into that much on the show. The show is normally about, injury rehab, performance optimization for runners, like bringing experts on and that kind of stuff. I don't like to get into my own personal nonsense too much, but it does serve a purpose for the goal setting side of things today. And I know that goals is very much on people's mind at the minute. And the inspiration for this episode was a post I put out on Instagram the other day. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, it's at Matthew Boyd Physio. Yeah, that's it. So go follow me. I put out this post the other day just talking about how I set my goals for the year, specifically relating to running, but then how it relates to the rest of my life. And it was just very popular. A lot of people messaged me about it. Clients came in, they were talking about it. People even sent me their goals using the format that I'm going to talk about today. So I wanted to share it with you guys too. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing today. And the main thing here is that I've got a little secret. It's nothing too special, but if you stay tuned to the end, it really helped me to actually achieve these goals in the last few years. Whereas before that, I was, very hit or miss. Anyway, let's get into it. So there's basically sort of 6 buckets when it comes to our life, I think. And what I do with my goal setting is attribute different goals into each bucket. So every New Year's Day, so tomorrow, I've set aside 2 hours. And the first thing I'm going to do is just sit down and have a coffee and think about last year. I try not to make it too structured, right? I try not to give myself anything to think about. I just think how it went. And then I start looking at my little headings for the 6 buckets, and then I just start brainstorming goals, things that I want to work on. So the first one is health. And I always had it as health or running, which for me, they're very much the same thing. And I'm sure they are for you guys too, that running is really a means to an end for me. It's how I stay healthy. And having races and things scheduled on the calendar helps me motivate myself to do the work and then stay healthy. So that's why running and health are kind of equivocal for me. So last year I want to do a marathon, right? And some of you guys know, I've been running for quite a while now. I've done a few marathons, and you might think, well, that's not a very, ambitious goal. And it sort of leads to the whole point of this. And the idea is that when I set my running goals, I want to put them in the context of my whole life. I've been talking to a lot of my clients this week because we're making like annual training plans for next season and trying to decide what the A races are and that kind of thing. And it leads to a lot of more in-depth and personal conversations because there's no point in setting really ambitious stretch goals for running, for PRs or new race distances, first Ironmans, first marathons, that kind of stuff. If, the rest of your life is really full up or you've got big things on. So this helps us get some context to our race goals. So last year when I was setting my goals, Lachlan, our baby, had been born November 10th. So he was, just about 2 months old. And I wasn't running at all. The most exercise I was doing was some like spin bike workouts with him like in the basement with me. And I was pretty much in the worst physical state of my life and mental. I hadn't slept. I wasn't exercising. I was barely working, so the idea of just doing a marathon, just getting back into running again seemed really ambitious at the time. And I knew he'd be able to run in the stroller by like June. He'd be like allowed with head control and stuff. And I thought, well, that'd be a fun way to train. So I set myself the goal of a fall marathon and I just wanted to finish it. And I did the Edmonton Marathon and I finished that in 4 hours and 8 minutes. And that for me wasn't super, I wasn't super happy with the time, definitely. And I have mixed feelings about the race overall because it was a really positive experience overall. Those of you who caught the episode with Mike a couple back, I got to run some of that race with Mike, who was one of my first coaching clients, and he set a PR. He absolutely smashed it. He had a wonderful race, and that was way more exciting for me than getting my marathon in my target, which was 4 hours. But also, I kind of sucked. I didn't do very well, so I didn't feel very good about that. So mixed feelings about that. That being said, the training was just great. Running with Lachlan, having him in the stroller, we would do the long run. I'd stop at the park. We'd get out and play for like half an hour on the swings and stuff. I put him back in. He'd have his bottle. He'd fall asleep. I'd run another hour or two. It was great. So really good overall, but definitely race-wise, not a particularly good performance. And it brought up some, insecurities that I have about my own running ability, right? So for you guys who don't know, although, I have this podcast, I specialize in runners and injury rehab as a physio. I'm not a very talented runner, right? My best marathon was in 4 hours, which is very much an average finish time for someone my sex and age. So sometimes I feel a bit of an imposter syndrome about that. And definitely since, running rehab injury specialist was one thing, but then, going into coaching where a lot of my clients are quite a bit faster than me, I would feel that kind of imposter syndrome and that's, just insecurity. So that gave me mixed feelings about it as well, right? Because my marathon performance even got a bit worse, right? That being said, I know that that's more like emotional and not super rational because I know that the people who work with me do so because they want to get over an injury and they want to set PRs. They don't really care about how good I am at running as long as I can help them do those things, which I do. And that's why they pay me, right? That's why they work with me. So it's a funny one for me to still have some imposter syndrome about that. But I suppose it's good for me to talk about it places like this because I am an average runner. I do think that in terms of injury rehab for runners, I am especially qualified, but I'm not particularly talented as a runner, and I don't ever want to present myself as that. So anyway, for this year, I was thinking I'd like to do 2 marathons. So one in the spring and one in the fall. I'd like to get my PR again or close to it in the spring. I think I'm going to do Calgary, so 4 hours. So I think I'm going to put that down when I do my goals tomorrow. And then the other one would be probably Edmonton or something like that again in the fall. And then beat whatever I get in the spring. So I don't do so well in the spring. I'd like to beat it in the fall. And you might think, well, that's quite conservative again in terms of running goals for the years. It's not crazy ambitious, certainly not. It's very realistic and very achievable. And again, it's going to round out a little bit when I explain the rest of the stuff that we're going to put on here. And that's why I think this is a good method if you're setting your running goals, because it takes into account the rest of your life. So, okay, next up, we'd have family. So what I do here is write down all the names of my close family members. And then I write down how I'm going to kind of maintain that relationship, which sounds a bit weird, but I live in Canada, my family back in England. So I write down stuff like, call mom every weekend. If we're going to do any visits, like who's coming and when, make sure that happens. Can we get to someone for Christmas is one I think I'm going to put down for this year, is can we get to see the in-laws at Christmas? And can we budget for that and time off and all that kind of stuff? So that's my family goals, right? Next up is social. I always do really bad with this one. It's why I have it as a special category, because probably like some of you guys, I'm not as social. Like the older I get, the more I just kind of hang out with my immediate family. And, I don't think that's particularly good for me, that tendency. I think, and, I certainly feel better when I hang out with, friends more. So like last year, I put on stuff like attend the run club at least once a week, like any of the local ones. And I did all right with that up until about the middle of the summer. And then the end of the summer. And then I really started to struggle with it. And yeah, they're the ones that I always fail and they get on my nerves. I put them down every year and I try, and I guess I don't prioritize them the way that I prioritize other things. And for some people, that's not really an issue. They just hang out with friends all the time naturally. My mom, my sisters are like that, but not me. So I have to put it down, set it as a goal. Okay. So next up, contribution. So contribution's a funny one. And, it sounds a little bit, this is the stuff where it's like, how do I want to give back, right? I feel like I've had a lot of advantages in my life and I want to give back in whatever way I can. So it sounds like a bit cheesy, but this is a podcast about goal setting, so it's bound to be a bit cheesy, right? So I used to put on stuff about like I would help out at a Paws and Claws, which is like a local dog rescue, and I would run with the dogs there. And I would run with them a couple of times a week for a few hours, and I really enjoyed it. I stopped last year after Lachlan came because we were just so busy, and I was going to start again as things got better. But I don't know. I felt like the other guys who work for the rescue, they had skill and knowledge and ability to really help, right? They really helped the dogs. They got them veterinary care. They got them, they got them rescued. They got them adopted. They looked after them when they were there. They had all this organizational skill involved with running a non-profit, right? Involved with running a charity. And I didn't have any of that. I just ran with them, right? Which was nice for the dogs, but it didn't really contribute, and it didn't have a lot of oomph. And I didn't feel like it was as good a use of my time as it could if I wanted to give back. So I was thinking like, well, what can I do that's a bit more leveraged? And that's why I started leaning into my podcasting more. I started making video courses and things like that, which I would give away for free, because my thinking there is that, I have special knowledge and skills when it comes to physiotherapy and injury rehab specifically for runners. So I get emails quite often from people who, they've watched my videos or, subscribe to my courses and stuff and found it helpful to get back running again, or even just inspiring to go and work with a local physio and this kind of stuff. And I really do try and make the content useful in and of itself. It's not just marketing material for me. It should be helpful for people, even if they never meet me. And I feel like that's a better way for me to contribute, because then I'm using all of the knowledge and skills I've spent the last 20 years acquiring, and not just doing something that like anybody could do, right? And so that's contribution. All right, wealth. So this is a particularly weird one for me to talk about on a podcast about running, right? And obviously very personal. It's not about particularly getting wealthy. I have nothing against that, because I really feel like as long as I'm making my income by helping people, if I become wealthy, that just means I help people more, as long as I keep that as my way of generating income, right? So I've got nothing against it, but the real reason I put this down and called it wealth rather than finances, which is what I used to call it, is because finances sounds boring and wealth sounds kind of exciting. So this one is because I managed to get through my 20s without any savings or any idea how to save for retirement. And when I hit 30, I started to get worried about it, and I started doing some research. So I read some books, I listened to some podcasts, and I learned a bit more about investing. I learned what compound interest was, but it still baffles me that I made it to age 30 without knowing what that is. Because I was like, how do you save up enough money for retirement? It just didn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I heard about this thing, and that's how you do it, right? And you got to invest your money. You don't just put it in an account, like a little savings account. You have to invest it in stuff anyway, this is not an investment podcast. You don't want investment advice from me. the reason I have that in here is because that is quite an important one, right? It's important for you guys as much as it is for me, and it's important that it goes on the list. And I'll just write down what's my savings goals for the year, and that gives me like my monthly saving target, and then what I'm going to do with it, which is just index funds for me. It's that straightforward. And then I also put in how much spending I expect that to leave me, right? So I have a spending budget then now, second after I've made my savings budget. And, I've been doing that since I was 30. It's been 8 years, and I've been really good at sticking to that goal. And that's really working. You can see my net worth increasing over time on the little apps I use to track it. So that being diligent with that has really worked, but it definitely took a few years to see some change. So that's the wealth bucket. Growth. Okay, so this one's a bit personal. So when I was practicing this earlier, because you don't want me to just freestyle it, right? I got to practice these things first, otherwise I blither on for ages. The growth one last year, it's all about like how I want to get better as a person. So last year, because we just had Lachlan, he was only a couple months old, it was all about like learning how to be a good dad. And I don't want to go into the details because I get emotional. Those of you who've had kids know in the first year or two, you can't talk about them much because you just start crying. So I'm not going to go into detail, but that was the gist of what I was talking about, well, what I was writing down for my growth goals last year. It was basically all about just being a dad. This year, it's going to be a challenging one again because, this growth one is really the one that speaks to me. It's the one that really motivates me. And this year, it's going to be about my, this month, I decided that I was going to stop working at the clinic that I've been working at. So you guys may know I work at a physio clinic called Collegiate Sports Medicine in Red Deer. And I've been gradually building up my sort of physio running coaching / video. I can't talk. Physio / coaching business on the side. And I decided that that's really what I want to do full time. So I sort of took the leap and decided to leave my job at the clinic. And now I have to learn how to grow that business, how to run that business, and how to do it in a way that I can actually generate a stable income for my family because, Christine stays at home with Lachlan and basically she does the baby, I do the money, right? That's the division of labor in our house. And stepping away from that regular income is, quite terrifying for me. So this growth, learning how to run a business properly and generate enough income to live off, that's going to be the big focus for me, especially the first half of the year. And that sort of gets me through all of my goals, and that's how I set them. And obviously I get more specific than I did with you guys, but that gives you the general gist of it. And as you can see, now if you take that in context, right, that growth one being really big for me right now, you can see why my running goals are more conservative, right? I would love to run, it's silly to say it out loud because I'm nowhere near it at the minute, but I'd love to run a 100-mile race, right? That's been something that's been like when I first heard that people could do that, I remember just being like, wow, could I do that, right? I can't, not right now. And then an Ironman, a full Ironman, those two things are kind of my bucket list things. But right, I've got Lachlan and I've just started a business. So I've just left my job at a clinic. Is it really sensible for me to try and do any of those things? Am I just going to be setting myself up for failure? I think so. The only way I could see doing them would be to sacrifice my time with my family. So that would be the family list. Obviously, the baby and Christine are top of that one. And I have to make time for them, right? So it's not feasible to train 15 hours a week for me at the minute. So that's why my running goals are more conservative, right? I still want to run. I still want to have them goals because they motivate me to train, but they're in the context of my goals for the year overall. And this is what I wanted to share with you guys is this way of setting goals. This is how I do it with my clients. This is why I'm a bit nosy with them in terms of like what's going on with school and what's going on with work. And like I was just chatting with a girl this morning who's going to be working with me, and she's just started her PhD dissertation, right? So we're not going to be setting goals that require her to do 15 hours of training a week, right? We're going to set realistic goals in that context so that she can achieve them and then she can have some sort of balance in her life. And it's the same for me. Now, the secret, if you stay tuned to the end, oh, we're just going over 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to be quick. The secret is the little reminder. You set a reminder in your phone to go off every 3 months. And I call it check project 2023 or check project 2022. And it links to the notes, or like I use Evernote, where you wrote the goals. And then just every 3 months when it comes up, you just check it. And it's amazing how well that worked. I started doing that a few years ago. And what I find is every 3 months when I check it, I don't do anything. I just kind of go through it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I haven't really been leaning into that one. Or, yeah, no, I need to, bring that one back up to the priority. I've been letting that slip. It's always the social one. I always suck at those ones. And that really helps. And then by the end of the year, most of the time, I've either tweaked the goals to be more realistic and achieve them, or I've kept the same goals and achieved them because I stayed accountable to it, or I have let a goal go, but I did it like deliberately. I didn't just forget about it. I didn't just not make time for it. I was just like, that didn't turn out to be as important as I thought it was going to be to me, and I wanted to focus on this other stuff. It allows me to sort of make that conscious decision about how I'm going to spend my energy. Okay, it wasn't too long. It was coming up 22 minutes. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope I kept it reasonably concise and useful. If you enjoyed the live episode, do let me know. I've just put my email address as the description for this episode. So just shoot me an email. I'd love to hear if you liked it. Then that's great. Just tell me and I'll do more. If you hated it, tell me. I will never do it again. Okay. If you would like a little PDF that sort of walks you through how to do that goal setting exercise for the year, just email me the word PDF and I'll send you that. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful New Year celebration, and I look forward to seeing you all smash those goals in 2023. If you're not following me on Instagram already, it's at mboydphysio, and I'd love to see you there. Come and say hello. It's much more interactive than this podcast platform. And yeah, have a good one.